Somewhere on this planet, there are human beings waking up every single morning on the edge of a cliff. Not metaphorically, not as a figure of speech. Literally on the edge. They cook their meals there. They raise their children there. They have lived, died, and been buried there for centuries. And most of the world has no idea these places even exist. Today, we are going to change that. What you are about to see is not the result of accident or desperation alone. These are communities, real, breathing, functioning villages that were deliberately built in locations so extreme, so vertical, so defiant of gravity and common sense that professional mountaineers have looked at them and quietly walked away. Engineers have studied them and struggled to explain how they were constructed. Geographers have mapped them and still cannot fully understand why any human being would choose to live there. We have searched every corner of this planet to bring you the 10 most extraordinary vertical villages ever built. From cliffs carved thousands of feet above sea level to volcanic rock faces that look as though the houses simply grew out of the stone itself, to ancient monasteries perched on pillars of rock that seem to float above the clouds. Every single location on this list is real. Every single community has a story, and every single one of them will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about human endurance. And we have saved the most unbelievable location for last. Number 1 on this list is a village so extreme, so remote, so breathtakingly dangerous to simply exist in that when researchers first documented it, many refused to believe the photographs were real. You will want to stay until the end for that one. This is the countdown. It begins now. Number 10. There is a mountain in the Hunan province of China, so sheer, so brutally vertical, that for most of recorded history, the people who lived on top of it were effectively cut off from the rest of civilization. The only way in or out was a series of handholds and footholds carved directly into the rock face. A climb so exposed and so dangerous that residents would sometimes go years without descending. That village is known as Aizhai Cliff Village, and for over 2 centuries, it defined the meaning of isolation. Aizhai sits perched along a canyon wall in the Jiangxi, Tujia, and Miao Autonomous Prefecture. Deep in the interior of Hunan, the canyon below plunges hundreds of meters. The cliffs rise nearly vertically on all sides. For the families who settled here, this was not a scenic choice. The mountainous terrain of this region had long provided natural protection from the raids and conflicts that swept through China's interior for centuries. High altitude meant safety, and so people climbed, and then they stayed. For generations, the only way residents could access the outside world was by descending 800 steps, hand-carved into the raw rock of the cliff face, exposed to open air, with nothing between the climber and a fatal drop. Children learned to navigate this descent before they could read. Elderly residents made the climb carrying supplies on their backs. The sick, the injured, and the dying had no access to medical facilities that required reaching the valley below. But here is what makes Aizhai genuinely extraordinary and what separates it from a simple story of poverty or isolation. The people of this village did not leave when the opportunity arose. When Chinese authorities eventually completed a modern access route, a tunnel bored directly through the mountain itself, many residents chose to remain. The culture, the community, the way of life that had developed over 200 years on that cliff face had become something that could not simply be relocated to the valley. And then came the bridge. The Aizhai Suspension Bridge, completed in 2012, now stretches across the canyon at a height of 335 meters above the river below, one of the highest bridges in the world, built in part to serve a community that had survived for centuries without it. A village that endured 200 years of vertical isolation became the anchor point for one of the most extraordinary engineering achievements in modern China. But if you think that is remarkable, the next location on this list was built in a place that makes Aizhai look almost accessible. Number 9. Picture a single enormous rock. Not a mountain, not a ridge, not a gradual slope. A single monolithic mass of stone rising almost vertically from the sea, connected to the Greek mainland by nothing more than a narrow causeway that disappears beneath the waves at high tide. Now, picture an entire city built on top of it. A city with churches, mansions, palaces, and prisons. A city that was, for much of its history, completely invisible to anyone sailing past. That city is Monemvasia, and it is one of the most astonishing inhabited locations in the history of the Mediterranean world. Monemvasia sits off the southeastern coast of the Peloponnese in southern Greece, anchored to a limestone rock that rises over 300 meters from the sea. The settlement built on its western flank is entirely hidden from the sea-facing approach, shielded by the rock itself, invisible to passing ships, unknown to enemies. This was not an accident. It was the entire point. Founded in the 6th century as a refuge against the Slavic and Avar invasions that swept through the Balkans, Monemvasia was designed to be unreachable, unseeable, and unconquerable. For centuries, it succeeded on all three counts. The single narrow gateway in the rock, the one entrance and exit, gave the city its name. Monemvasia in Greek means simply one entrance, one way in, one way out. If you controlled that passage, you controlled everything behind it. At its height, Monemvasia housed tens of thousands of people, operated as one of the most important trading ports in the Byzantine Empire, and produced a sweet wine so prized that it was exported across Europe under the name Malmsey. Shakespearean texts mention it. Medieval kings requested it specifically. All of this from a city that most people sailing past could not even see. But here is what researchers find most difficult to reconcile. The upper town of Monemvasia, the highest portion of the settlement, clinging to the very summit of the rock, was essentially a separate, self-contained city. The climb from the lower town to the upper required navigating stone staircases so steep and so narrow that pack animals could not make the ascent. Everything carried to the upper town, food, water, building materials, the dead, went up by human hand. People still live in Monemvasia today, not as a historical curiosity, but as a genuine community, and the single entrance remains the only way in. But nothing you have seen so far compares to what awaits further down this list. Number 8. There is a city in Yemen that looks as though it was painted onto the side of a mountain by someone who had never seen a building before. Every house stacks directly on top of the one below it. Every rooftop becomes the next family's courtyard. The streets, if you can call them that, are more accurately described as corridors carved between walls of living rock and inhabited stone. This is Al-Hajara, a village in the Haraz Mountains, and it has been continuously occupied for over 1,000 years in one of the most inhospitable vertical environments on the planet. Al-Hajara sits approximately 2,400 meters above sea level, embedded in the ridgeline of the Haraz Mountains in western Yemen, roughly 100 kilometers west of Sana'a. The mountains here are dramatic and unforgiving, steep, exposed, windswept, and subject to temperature swings that would challenge even well-equipped modern travelers. The village does not simply sit on the mountain, it is the mountain. Buildings are constructed from the local volcanic basalt, cut from the same rock on which they stand, colored and textured so similarly to the natural cliff that from certain angles, the village becomes almost impossible to distinguish from the face of the mountain itself. This was, once again, entirely deliberate. The Haraz region has historically been one of the most strategically contested areas of the Arabian Peninsula. The altitude provided natural defense, the camouflage provided invisibility, and the sheer difficulty of the approach. Steep trails, exposed switchbacks, and altitude provided a physical deterrent that no wall or garrison could match. But life inside Al-Hajara carries its own extreme conditions. Water has always been the defining challenge. Rainfall in the Haraz Mountains is seasonal and unpredictable. For centuries, the village depended entirely on cisterns carved into the rock, collecting and storing every drop of precipitation that fell during the brief rainy season. A failed rainy season could mean catastrophe. The mathematics of survival here, water per person per day, storage capacity, evaporation rate, were calculated by necessity long before any formal system of engineering existed. What makes this location genuinely shocking is not just its age or its altitude. It is the fact that the architectural system developed in Al-Hajara, multi-story stone construction on near vertical cliff faces, integrated drainage, shared load-bearing walls, predates by centuries the engineering principles that modern architects use to describe exactly the same techniques. The builders of Al-Hajara solved problems that engineering textbooks would not formally address for another 1,000 years. And yet, this next location was built in conditions that would have made even the builders of Al-Hajara hesitate. Number 7. There is a place in the cold, high-altitude desert of the Ladakh region in northern India, where a Buddhist monastery clings to the face of a sheer cliff as though it was placed there by hand from above. It sits at the junction of two gorges, surrounded by vertical rock on three sides, with a drop of several hundred meters directly below its outer walls. It has no road access. It has no flat ground. It has, for over 1,000 years, been home to a living, functioning monastic community. That monastery is Pugtal Gompa, and it is one of the most astonishing human habitations on the surface of the earth. Pugtal, sometimes spelled Pugtal or Puktal, is located in the Zanskar Valley of the Ladakh Union Territory in northern India, at an elevation of approximately 3,800 meters above sea level. The monastery is built into and around a large natural cave in the cliff face, with the cave itself forming the spiritual heart of the complex. Additional structures, dormitories, prayer halls, a library, storage rooms, a school, extend outward from the cave along ledges and constructed platforms in the cliff, connected by staircases and ladders so narrow and so precipitous that first-time visitors frequently stop and refuse to continue. The monastery was founded in the 15th century by a monk named Gangsem Sherap Sampo, who chose this location not despite its extreme isolation, but precisely because of it. In the tradition of Himalayan Buddhism, the most profound spiritual practice requires separation from the distractions of ordinary life, and there are few places on earth more effectively separated from ordinary life than a cave mouth in the face of a Zanskar cliff. For centuries, the only access to Pugtal was a trail along the gorge walls, exposed, narrow, and impassable for significant portions of the year when ice and snow covered the cliff paths. Monks who fell ill had no option for evacuation. Supplies came in by foot or by the backs of animals that could navigate the trail. The community was, in every practical sense, on its own. But that is not even the most surprising part. Despite these conditions, Pugtal Gompa houses a functioning school that has educated local children for generations, in a location that mountaineers approach with caution. Children have learned to walk those cliff paths as a matter of daily routine. The monastery library contains manuscripts estimated to be over 500 years old, preserved at altitude, in a cave, through centuries of Himalayan winters, without climate control, without archival technology, and without the knowledge of the outside world for most of their existence. They survived anyway, and what waits ahead on this list survived conditions even more extreme. Number 6. High in the Apennine Mountains of central Italy, at an altitude of nearly 1,400 meters, there sits a fortress that most people would look at and immediately conclude was never meant for human habitation at all. Its walls rise from a circular platform of bare rock at the summit of an isolated peak. The surrounding landscape is a wilderness of high ridges, steep gorges, and exposed plateau. In winter, the wind here can strip the skin from exposed hands in minutes. The nearest village, with reliable supplies, is a significant journey away along mountain roads that close entirely in heavy snow. And yet, for several centuries, people not only lived here, they built an entire community around this fortress, and some of them never left. This is the settlement surrounding Rocca Calascio, and it occupies one of the most brutally exposed inhabited positions in all of Europe. Rocca Calascio is located in the Gran Sasso e Monti della Laga National Park in the Abruzzo region of central Italy. The fortress itself, a Norman castle dating to the 10th century, is among the highest fortifications in Italy. The small church of Santa Maria della Pietà, built just below the castle walls following a devastating earthquake and Ottoman raid in the 16th century, became the spiritual anchor of a community that gathered here not for comfort, but for defense. The conditions at this altitude on the central Apennine Plateau are classified as severe. Winters bring heavy snowfall that can isolate the settlement for weeks. Summer thunderstorms sweep across the exposed peak with almost no warning, bringing lightning, hail, and sudden drops in temperature. There is no natural water source at the summit. Every drop of water historically had to be carried up, collected from rain, or sourced from snowmelt. So why live here? The answer, as with so many entries on this list, is survival. The hilltop position provided a commanding view of 3 valleys simultaneously. An approaching army could be spotted hours before arrival. The fortress walls provided last resort protection, and the isolation itself, the sheer difficulty of the approach, was a deterrent to raiding parties that had easier targets to pursue. What researchers find remarkable is the evidence that the community around Rocca Calascio maintained a functioning social structure. Births, marriages, religious observance, communal farming on the lower slopes, in conditions that modern wilderness survival experts would classify as genuinely dangerous for year-round occupation. The people who lived here were not soldiers or monks under orders. They were families. They chose this. The settlement is largely abandoned today. But if you think abandoned means forgotten, wait until you see what is coming at number 1, because the people there never left. Number 5, we need to talk about rock. Not rock used as building material, not rock as a foundation or a backdrop. We need to talk about villages built inside the rock itself, not caves in the conventional sense, not simple hollowed-out shelters. We are talking about entire multi-story homes, complete with carved windows, interior rooms, storage cellars, and connecting corridors, carved directly into columns of volcanic tuff in the high plateau of northwestern Iran. This is Kandovan, and it has been continuously inhabited for over 700 years in conditions that defy almost every assumption modern people make about what a home is and how it should be built. Kandovan is located in the East Azerbaijan province of Iran, approximately 50 kilometers south of the city of Tabriz, at an elevation of roughly 2,300 meters in the foothills of Mount Sahand, a dormant volcano. The village sits in a valley where thousands of years of volcanic activity deposited deep layers of soft tuff, compressed volcanic ash at subsequent millennia of erosion, sculpted into tall, irregular cones and spires. The result is a landscape that looks more like a science fiction planet than any familiar terrain. Dozens of pointed rock towers, some reaching 15 meters in height, clustered together in a valley surrounded by the slopes of the volcano. The people of Kandovan did not simply find shelter in these cones. They moved in, and then they began to expand. Using hand tools, they carved upward and inward, adding rooms, connecting levels, hollowing out storage spaces, and eventually creating multi-generational family homes inside single rock formations. A family might occupy a cone for hundreds of years, with each generation carving a little deeper, adding a room, expanding a corridor. The tuff insulates extraordinarily well in a region where summer temperatures can exceed 40 degrees Celsius and winters bring heavy snow and bitter cold. The interior temperature inside these rock homes remains remarkably stable year-round. No heating system, no air conditioning, just the thermal mass of volcanic rock, doing what it has done for centuries. But here is what makes Kandovan genuinely astonishing at number 5 on this list. People still live here today. Not as a preserved historical exhibit, not as a tourist demonstration, as their actual homes. Some of the families currently living inside these rock cones can trace their uninterrupted occupation of their specific rock formation back to the Mongol period, over 7 centuries of continuous habitation inside the same piece of volcanic stone. The mountain has been their home for so long. The mountain and the home have become the same thing. But the next location on this list sits not inside a mountain, but on top of pillars of rock, so tall they seem to touch the sky. Number 4, there are places in this world where the act of simply going to church required a level of physical courage that most people today would find extraordinary. Imagine climbing a ladder, not a gentle staircase, not a switchback path, but a vertical wooden ladder fixed to the face of a rock pillar, hundreds of meters above the ground, with nothing beneath you but open air, to attend a morning prayer service. This was daily reality for the monks of the Meteora communities in central Greece, and for centuries it was the only way in or out of their monasteries. Meteora is not one village, but a constellation of monastic settlements perched atop natural sandstone pillars that rise abruptly from the plain of Thessaly, and it is among the most extraordinary inhabited landscapes anywhere on the surface of the planet. The Meteora rock formations rise from the valley floor near the town of Kalambaka in the Thessaly region of central Greece. The pillars, formed over millions of years by erosion of a prehistoric seabed, stand between 300 and 400 meters tall, with near vertical faces and flat or slightly domed summits. The word Meteora itself comes from the Greek for suspended in the air, or in the heavens. Standing at the base and looking up at the monastery walls built along the summit edges, the name feels entirely accurate. Monks began settling on these pillars as early as the 9th century, seeking precisely the kind of radical isolation that Phugtal's founders sought in the Himalayas. By the 14th and 15th centuries, there were 24 functioning monastic communities distributed across the various pillars. To reach them, visitors and residents alike had to use one of 2 methods: retractable rope ladders that could be hauled up in case of attack, or large rope nets used to hoist people and supplies directly up the cliff face in a basket system operated by a winch at the top. There was no other way. No steps, no path, no alternative route. If the monks decided to haul up the ladder, you were not getting in. And if you were already inside when they did, you were not getting out. What happened next shocked researchers who began studying the Meteora communities in the modern era. The condition of the ropes used for the basket hoist, the mechanism by which people were lifted hundreds of meters through open air, was never on any formal replacement schedule. When asked how they decided when to replace the ropes, historical accounts record that monks responded simply when God decided they would break. 6 of the original monasteries remain active today. Stairs were eventually cut into the rock faces in the 1920s, but for 600 years before that, this was the reality of daily life suspended in the sky. And yet, what awaits at number 3 makes even the ropes of Meteora feel like a safety feature. Number 3, there is a village in Spain that should not exist. Not in the way that all extreme locations might invite that phrase, but in a genuinely structural, engineering, and geological sense. The historic district of Ronda in the province of Malaga, Andalusia, sits on a tabletop plateau that is bisected by a gorge, El Tajo, that drops approximately 120 meters straight down from the edge of the inhabited street. Not from a viewpoint, not from a lookout platform, from the edge of the road, from outside the front doors of occupied buildings, from the gardens of private homes. 120 meters of vertical drop, right there as a feature of the neighborhood. Ronda is located in the Malaga province of Andalusia in southern Spain, roughly 100 kilometers from the coast. The city sits at an altitude of approximately 720 meters on a plateau carved by the Guadalquivir River over millions of years into the surrounding limestone. The result is that the plateau on which Ronda is built terminates on its eastern and southern edges in sheer cliff faces that fall directly to the gorge below. The city has been occupied since at least the time of the ancient Iberians, later fortified by the Romans, then developed extensively during the Moorish period, and eventually became one of the strongholds of Al-Andalus. The logic of its location was identical to Monemvasia and Roca Calaccio. Elevation plus sheer faces equal natural defense. An army approaching Ronda from the gorge side was not approaching at all. They were simply looking up at walls. But here is the detail that genuinely separates Ronda from every other defended hilltop city in Europe. The famous Puente Nuevo, the New Bridge, was built across El Tajo Gorge in the 18th century to connect the two halves of the divided city. Its central arch alone stands 98 meters above the river below. When it was completed in 1793, after 40 years of construction, the lead architect was reportedly lowered in a basket to inspect the finished work from below. The same basket method used, incidentally, by the monks of Meteora. He was overcome by the height and had to be hauled back up before completing the inspection. The man who built a bridge over a 100-meter chasm could not bring himself to look at it from the bottom. People live beside this drop today. They have gardens. They have neighbors. They take their children to school past a cliff that drops nearly 100 meters to the river below, and they do it every single day without giving it a second thought. And yet, the next location makes Ronda's gorge look like a gentle slope. Number 2, you are going to need a moment to fully understand what this village is. Not because it is difficult to describe, but because the human mind has a tendency to automatically correct information that seems impossible, to assume that certain numbers must be exaggerated, that certain photographs must be manipulated, that certain claims must contain some misunderstanding. The village of Gamsutl in the Republic of Dagestan in southern Russia sits at an elevation of approximately 1,700 meters in the Caucasus Mountains, at the very summit of a rocky peak, with drops on nearly every side and no accessible road to the outside world. That much it shares with other locations on this list. What separates it is this: the village was, until recently, inhabited by a single person, and before that, by a community that had occupied this peak for over 5,000 years. Gamsutl is located in the Gunibsky district of Dagestan, a republic of the Russian Federation situated in the northeastern Caucasus, bordering Georgia and Azerbaijan. The peak on which it sits is steep enough that the village can only be approached on foot, via a trail that takes between 1 and 2 hours to climb from the nearest road, depending on conditions. The stone houses, some dating back centuries, some to a far older period of occupation, are built directly into the summit rock, stacked so tightly and so vertically that from below, the village and the peak appear to be a single geological feature. Archaeological evidence suggests the site has been occupied for an extraordinary length of time, possibly as far back as 3,000 years before the Common Era, making it one of the longest continuously inhabited elevated settlements anywhere in the Caucasus region. The logic of occupation here mirrors what we have seen elsewhere: defensible heights, natural fortification, protection from the raids and invasions that cyclically swept through this geopolitically volatile mountain corridor over millennia. For most of the 20th century, Gamsutl had a functioning population, a school, a medical station, and a community that maintained the village as a living place. Then, slowly, people began to leave. The young moved to cities. The old followed their families or passed away. The infrastructure collapsed. The road, never more than a steep trail, deteriorated further, and by the early 21st century, only one man remained. His name was Abdurrahman Nurmagomedov, a former nurse. He chose to stay. He cultivated a small garden on the peak. He maintained what he could. He greeted the occasional hikers and journalists who made the climb to find him. He died in 2015, and the village of Gamsutl became officially uninhabited for the first time in perhaps 5,000 years. But nothing. Not the cliff-face monasteries of Meteora, not the rock towers of Kandovan, not the last man on the summit of Gamsutl. Nothing compares to what holds the #1 position on this list. Number 1, there is a location in the Zagros Mountains of Kurdistan, Iraq, that challenges every assumption this video has built from the moment it began. We have seen villages on cliffs, villages inside rock, villages on pillars, villages on summits. But the community of Palangan is something the previous 9 entries have only been building toward: a settlement so geometrically extreme, so architecturally relentless, so completely and utterly vertical in its organization, that it is not merely a village on a mountain. It is a village that is the mountain. Every house is another house's road. Every roof is another family's street. And it has been this way in continuous occupation for centuries. Palangan is located in the Hawraman Valley of the Kurdistan province in western Iran, near the Iraq border, in the heart of the Zagros mountain range. The valley is deep, narrow, and enclosed by limestone cliffs on both sides. The village of Palangan occupies the face of one of these cliffs at a near 45-degree angle, but that description fails completely to convey what this actually means when you stand before it. In Palangan, there are no roads. There are no streets in any conventional sense. The village rises from the valley floor to the upper ridge in a series of approximately 20 visible tiers, 20 rows of stone houses, stacked one on top of the other, each row built directly on the roof of the row below. The roof of one home is the courtyard of the next. The courtyard of that home is the roof of another below it. A resident on the 20th tier, looking down, sees not a cliff face, but a continuous descending cascade of rooftops, courtyards, doorways, and lives, all the way to the valley floor. Walking through Palangan means walking upward, always upward, through a maze of stone passages and open-air courtyards that transition seamlessly from one family's living space into another family's ceiling. There are no clear boundaries between public and private space. There are no clear distinctions between ground and roof. The entire village is simultaneously a floor and a ceiling, a road and a building, a community and a mountain. The architecture was not designed by engineers. It evolved over centuries of necessity, each generation adding another tier, solving the problem of how to build upward with nothing but stone, gravity, and the accumulated wisdom of the people who came before them. The result is a structure of such organic complexity that modern architects who have studied it describe it using the same language biologists use to describe coral reefs: not built but grown, not designed but developed, each element in a relationship of structural dependency with every element around it. But the real reason Palangan occupies the #1 position on this list is not just its architecture. It is this: the people are still there. Not tourists, not historical reenactors, not a preserved demonstration for visiting academics. The families of Palangan still wake up every morning on their roof, which is their neighbor's road, which is built on their other neighbor's ceiling, which descends in an unbroken cascade to a valley floor that is, from the top tiers, too far below to see clearly. Children run across these rooftop roads. Elderly residents navigate the steep stone passages that connect tier to tier. Groceries are carried upward through the village layer by layer, and every single tier, every single household, every single family in Palangan is living inside an architectural system so perfectly integrated with the mountain itself that removing any single element would threaten the stability of everything around it. Every house holds up its neighbor. Every roof supports the road above it. Every family is, quite literally, the foundation of someone else's home. When researchers first published detailed photographic surveys of Palangan, the images were widely dismissed as composites or manipulations. The geometry seemed too extreme, the vertical stacking too absolute, the integration of human habitation and mountain geology too complete to be real. But it is real. It has always been real, and the people of Palangan have known it was real for longer than most of the countries in which you and I live have existed as nations. This is not a village built near danger. This is not a community that tolerates extreme conditions for strategic or spiritual advantage. This is a people for whom the vertical face of a mountain gorge is simply home, the only home, the best home, the home that their grandparents and great-grandparents and the generations before them made into something that no architect has ever fully been able to replicate, and no engineer has ever fully been able to explain. We have traveled from the cliff paths of Hunan to the sea rock of the Greek coast, from the volcanic towers of Iran to the sandstone pillars floating above the plains of Thessaly, from the summit of a Dagestani peak where one man refused to leave for the rest of his life, to the cascading stone tiers of a mountain village in the Zagros, where an entire community continues to live in a way that the rest of the world has never quite managed to believe. What all of these places share is not simply extreme location. What they share is the decision, made generations ago and honored ever since, that this cliff, this peak, this rock face, this gorge wall was where life would happen, not despite the difficulty, sometimes because of it. The mountains did not break these communities. In many cases, the mountains are the reason these communities still exist at all. Now we want to hear from you. Which of these 10 vertical villages shocked you the most? Was it the rooftop roads of Palangan, the basket ropes of Meteora, the 5,000-year solitude of Gamsutal, the rock-carved homes of Kandovan, still housing families today? Tell us in the comments below. We read every single one. And if this video showed you something you have never seen before, if it made you stop, look twice, and reconsider what you thought was possible for human beings to endure and to build, then subscribe to this channel. Because there are more places on this planet that the world has forgotten, and we are going to find every single one of them. The world is stranger, more extreme, and more extraordinary than most people will ever know. Stay with us. We are just getting started.